I was noticing in myself that was making me feel like there is a place where therapy kind of hits a wall, and I wanted to blow through that wall and create healing spaces that offered something that therapy just can't offer.
Step right up, folks. You're now entering It's a Circus, where parenting isn't always a show-stopping act, but it's certainly entertaining. I'm your host, Elsa, here to prove that no one really knows what they're doing, and that's perfectly fine. Let's have some real conversations, peel back the layers, and remind you that you're never alone in the madness. Let's get the show rolling. Okay, everybody, are you ready for a masterclass? This is coming from Alissa, who the founder of Root Collective, which is a somatic therapy that she created on her own. This is really cool, and I'm serious about this masterclass. Grab a pen and paper, get ready to hit rewind, because there are so many tips and tricks and stories and just little phrases that she says where I, even in the editing process, was like, oh my goodness, this is powerful. So get ready. She talks about managing emotions and how the world is just not set up to help anyone manage their emotions. And so she gives some tips on that. She shares her personal journey of postpartum depression, entering therapy for the first time as a therapist and what that was all about. She also talks about going through COVID with a 3-year-old toddler and a 6-week-old and how isolating that experience was. She speaks to how that sparked her move to Florida, and then really this idea of shifting her practice into building what is now called the Root Collective and really breaking the limitations of therapy down. And this is a powerful episode, like I said. Get ready. It's a good one. And without further ado, here's Alissa. Hi, Alissa. Thank you. And welcome to joining It's a Circus podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Okay. I start this question with every episode. So give us your mamahood stats. How long have you been a mom for? Who do you mom? How old are they? All that good stuff.
Yeah. So my son will actually be 8 in like a week and a half. So we are just shy of his 8th birthday, and my daughter is about 5.5.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
And those are my 2 babies.
So fun. Have you always wanted to be a mother?
Yes. Yes. All interestingly enough, all of my like high school and college jobs outside of when I worked inside of the college that I was going to were always childcare. So I had friends that like were in restaurants and in retail stores or grocery stores, and those were always their like, the typical high school jobs. And I went like right into a um childcare center at a gym and like
Oh my God, I
stayed
love
there
it.
summer camps. So I've always worked with kids.
I love that. I think it's so interesting because there's like the group of people that are like, I've always loved kids, can't wait to have, like, want to have kids. Like, that's the vein. And then there is this other group, which I very much sat in, which was like, don't make me babysit a kid. Don't make me touch anything at all. Still potentially
Yeah.
want to be a mom, but like everybody else is not here for it for that
Yeah.
time.
I
So
totally get that.
there
Yeah.
is a special place. And at this point, having little kids and having to have help and support, I'm like, there is a special place for all of you, a special soul. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you to you and everybody else that is there, because that is so helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to get into the journey of motherhood, but I do think it's beneficial to kind of just talk about, because one of the reasons why I'm so excited to have you on here is really your work that you're doing right now. And I think
Right.
let's start there, and then I'll probably make you skip back and talk about your journey of motherhood, because I think it leads to where you're at.
So I own a business called Root Collective,
Mhm.
and we are a local business here in Sarasota. I started it when we were still living up in Pennsylvania, and I was also in private practice in Pennsylvania, and now I just see some clients virtually, my Pennsylvania clients, for psychotherapy. And so I had my psychotherapy practice. We moved virtual during the pandemic. And there were some things I was noticing in my psychotherapy practice, in addition to some things I was noticing in myself that was making me feel like there is a place where therapy kind of hits a wall. And I wanted to blow through that wall and create healing spaces that offered something that therapy just can't offer. So it
Wow.
could be like a beautiful complement to what therapy can do, but to really fill the gaps that therapy misses, right? And those things really were community
Mhm.
and connection and feeling like you're not alone in your experience, especially around trying to regulate our nervous systems, trying to reduce stress, trying to be present and grounded as people and as like specifically as women. I specialized in anxiety and chronic stress related issues in women.
Mhm.
That was my whole practice. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of what led to me saying, I think we need community spaces to do this work.
Wow.
And I also think we need movement when we're doing this
Mm.
work because nothing sounds the system like incorporating movement and specifically really mindful somatic movement. And that's what led to me creating Root Collective, which is really a blend. When we moved here, I decided to get some additional training to blend my backgrounds of training in yoga and training as a therapist. So I completed this training that really bridged those two worlds. And started teaching a class on Friday mornings that I just called like somatic yoga for releasing stress and emotions. That was like 14 months ago. And within like 6 months, it had grown. And then I created a membership community. And now we have a membership community of like almost 50 women here in Sarasota. And I can explain a little bit more about what we do and all of that stuff. But it's really just a home for healing and community.
Ugh. Okay. That like literally gives me goosebumps in general. And one, because I think it hits a nerve that's just like so needed. And I think that your soul just craves. Um,
Mhm.
we spoke about this before, but I want to say this here is I found you first because I was looking for somatic healing because
Mhm.
on my, I mean, you talk about like the nervous system and the stress. I really needed some support around moving, life changes, early parenting, early small children, all of those things. And I was like, okay, somatic healing. I had done some research and I was like, oh, I wonder if there's anyone local I would just love, love, love to like
Mhm.
connect and be in that space. And I found you, which is just so cool. Um, and I love that you blended those two together. Can you talk about how you found one, I want to talk about that wall. What is that wall? And then
Mm.
two, how you placed movement and identified movement as being a very critical piece of calming your nervous system and stress and all of that.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. So I think the wall that I realized people were hitting and that I also really resonated with is when I was working with women who really struggled with chronic stress and anxiety, there's a few things that I really started to unpack as common threads and themes that really influenced everyone, and again, myself included. And then I just started to use those themes and kind of like have them be the lens of how I viewed other people and
Wow.
others who were, like experiencing a lot of stress. And
Mm-hmm.
it's true across men and women, but I just like resonate more with the female experience. And so that's the group that I have focused my work on.
Right.
Um, Really, what it is, it's a lot of repressed emotions.
Oh,
And we just don't know how to feel as a society.
right. Ah, okay.
We don't feel.
Go off on that because that is so real. I can't even handle it.
Yeah, I mean, we're taught from such a young age, and I think everyone's upbringing kind of did this in different ways, but feeling painful emotions is hard. And as
Mm-hmm.
a parent, to link it back to that,
Yeah.
there are few things harder than watching your child be in pain, whether that's emotional pain or physical pain, etc. So I fully understand how this happens with the combination of not having education and resources years ago that we have now, right? So a child gets hurt or they feel an emotional wave of something, and the first thing the parent tries to do, or the adults in the space try to do, wherever that might be, is
Mm.
like dilute. right? It's just like, stop, no, 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 don't get upset about that. And they might go the route of like, here's a lollipop or here's a whatever, like, oh no, go watch TV. Or we kind of do that. It's not that bad. Think about this. Or we do the shaming of like, suck it up, it's not a big deal, right? Or just like, go away, I can't handle this right now. And we learn from such a young age, like our natural human emotional experience is too much. And especially for those of us that are more deeply feeling, a little bit more intuitive, sensitive to their environments, those tend to be the women I would see that were struggling with chronic stress and anxiety. Because, in my experience, personally and professionally, the waves of emotions are almost so much bigger for those of us that are sensitive and intuitive and deeply feeling. And so the impacts of repressing that are a lot stronger than maybe somebody who doesn't naturally feel as deeply or doesn't naturally attune as much to their environment or to the
Wow.
emotions of other people, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so it became this like, there's something wrong with me. I'm
Mm-hmm.
too sensitive. I'm too emotional. I'm too much. And so we repress, repress, repress. And the result of that is all of this pent up stuff that we're neglecting inside of ourselves. And then we almost begin to view our emotions as a threat. So now something happens to us and we feel an emotion bubble up about it, and it just actually becomes like triggering to our nervous systems and sends our entire body into a stress response state
Wow.
because we've now become scared of and threatened by our feelings, right? And so I think the biggest piece of this, and there's this quote that I love, and to be honest, I don't even know where it originated from, but it basically says, we are wounded in relationship, and so we have to heal in relationship.
Mm.
And the wounding of all of this emotional repression and having to hide parts of ourselves to fit in, that all happened in relationship to
Mm-hmm.
others, community, to school spaces, to sports spaces, to home spaces, right? Friendship spaces, wherever that was, probably multiple places, right?
Right.
But we need to heal in community spaces too. We need to teach and rewire the nervous system that like it is safe to be with yourself. It is safe to be with your emotional world. And we can do that a little bit in the one-on-one relationship for sure. But what I kept noticing is after they left me and their sessions with me, if they didn't have anywhere else in their life that they could turn to, and really keep practicing that ability to be present with themselves and not feel judged and to feel like other people could really receive them and their authenticity, then there was like a wall in how much growth could occur, right? And
Yeah.
so I was like, I feel like I need to create those spaces. I need to create those safe spaces where women can really lean into their authentic needs and their
Mm-hmm.
emotions depth and feel like they're really being held in that. And then the movement piece came in as a recognition of what yoga has always done for me. And I never knew the science of why I would feel anxious and I would feel this need to just like throw on YouTube yoga and move my body when I first found yoga, right? And now that I know the science of why that is, it makes so much sense because it's a nervous system regulating practice for a bunch of different reasons. And so there's only so much you can do, right? Like up in this space when you're just trying to think your way through things and
Mm.
talk your way through things, you really hit another wall because it's an embodied experience. Your nervous system needs your body's involvement in the process. And the best way to do that, I think, is through incorporating movement. So it's a really long-winded answer, but those were the two worlds that I realized like really needed to come together.
Yeah. Okay. As you're speaking, I just like feel like I have lived that. I feel like
Yeah.
probably a lot of people are feeling very similarly when they hear you say that. Um, that is amazing. So tell me about because it's not yoga necessarily that you're doing somatic. So tell me about what somatic is.
Yeah, so what really makes it somatic at the end of the day
Okay.
is really encouraging introspection in sensation in the body. And so yoga does inherently do that, which is why it is a very grounding practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I first found yoga, I loved that, like, they were like, "Okay, engage these muscle groups, engage your core in this way, make sure your arms are," like, it's very sensation focused. You're always
Mhm.
trying to track and pay attention to, with slow movements, what you're feeling in your body and where. And also, the gap I found in the yoga space is that you're still being guided and led by another person. And so, yes, you might be encouraged to feel into sensation in your body, but there isn't a lot of intuitive movement. It's still very sequenced and structured by whatever the instructor sets for the class, right?
Right.
And so, after I became a mom and yoga was a little bit less about trying to master headstands and arm balances and all of that stuff that was fun in my 20s, after I became a mom, I realized I was getting onto my yoga mat more for peace
Mm.
and sensation and stretching and flexibility and,
Mhm.
like, connecting to myself, right?
Right.
And so I would go to these structured classes and I would go through the sequences, and halfway through the sequence, I would just be like, "But my body doesn't wanna do this right now. I like being in child's pose, I wanna stay here a little bit longer," or,
Mhm.
"Oh, that stretch feels so good, I'm not ready to move out of that yet," and the whole
Mhm.
class is, like, moving on to the next pose, right? And so that's when this feeling started to bubble up in me of like, I wish there was a space where I could still feel the energy of a collective. Like, you go to a class and you're still surrounded by people moving their bodies, and that wave that goes across the room when everyone is grounding their systems at the same time. You can feel that. It's like potent energetically, right? And that's so different than what I would feel at an at home practice. And I was like, I want to go to a space that I could still move my body in community with others, but I want more autonomy and agency in how I move. And I want to feel like I'm given suggestions and support specifically for ways to do it. So it's like grounding to my nervous system, but I want a lot of freedom in how I
Mhm.
move.
Mhm.
And I also want to, like, journal.
Love
And
it.
I wanna reflect,
Yeah,
like,
totally. Let's just layer in some more things to that.
it's like when I'm moving my body, I get, like, these epiphanies and these, like,
Totally.
aha moments, and I'm like, "Oh, I feel really peaceful about this, and I'm looking at it differently now, and I feel like
Yeah.
I wanna write this down because, like,
Yeah.
wow, I've never viewed it this way before."
Yeah.
And there were just no spaces like that
Mhm.
existed, It's either, like, sequenced yoga classes or psychotherapy where maybe that's where you're doing your processing and your journaling and whatever. And I was like, "I need to blend these 2 worlds." So it's now a somatic movement class.
Mhm.
It is informed by yoga,
Mhm.
um, but it's really just about, like, your body becomes your friend in the process, and rather than me telling you what to do, I teach you how to feel into sensations in your body so your body can tell you what it needs.
That's beautiful. I am so obsessed with this for so many reasons. And just personally, I had a moment I've shared with you. I had two kiddos back to back. So you feel alien in your body already. And that kind of coming back into, and you're I mean, I was fearful coming back into my body because I was like, oh my God, we just went through this like huge thing.
Mhm.
And as in carrying your kid for 10 months and then giving birth, which is crazy, that whole process. And
Yes.
then to reconnect onto how your body was. I mean, I will tell you, I was avoidant. I didn't want to do it. I knew I wanted to do it, and it was like scary. And I had
Mhm.
started really aggressively because in my past, I have loved like the HIIT works out, the cycling, like high intensity, loud, crazy. It was like my vibe. That
Yeah.
is definitely was not my vibe when I needed kind of this like reconnection. And
Mhm.
I had naturally gone into like meditating while I was doing
Mm.
my workout because of that too, where you're like, I want to feel connected to my body. I don't want to hear a person telling me what to do. And then, two, and yoga really brought this up for me when I was like deep in yoga world, which was the perfectionism. Oh, I have to hit this and I have to do it a certain way. And that person over there is doing it way better than I could ever do it. Oh my gosh, I'm like failing already. So it was like all of that. So to find that with somebody with your experience and expertise, to find that that is a real thing, real connection, and to create a world where you have that. I mean, that is magic, Alissa. Thank you for just bringing it into the world.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for sharing your experience because I think that's so valid, you know? And
Yeah.
I heard two things in what you said that I think are really worthwhile to point out because I feel like other people would really relate to it, which is like just understanding the difference of what our systems need at different times. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we do need the high intensity, and sometimes we do need the like stimulating environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it is something our system is craving, and that is valid. And then other times our system is craving something slower, something more intentional, something more um, grounding and slow flowing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just like allowing ourselves to not judge when we need one or the other, but just trying to feel into that and honor it. And so I think that's really valid. Like sometimes we surprise ourselves and we think like, oh, I think I want this slow flow practice. But then all of a sudden you start moving your body and you're like, no, I need high intensity, or
Totally.
vice versa. Like you
Mm-hmm.
wake up in the morning, you had booked a class for a high intensity workout, and you wake up and you're like, the last thing I want to do right now is, like, push myself in that way, you know, and when
Totally.
we judge and we shame ourselves, like, "Ugh, just make yourself do it," right?
Mm-hmm.
When that's not really a self-honoring thing because our systems are in a different place than we thought they would be, right?
Right. Right.
And so I wanna name that piece, and then I also loved that you named how sometimes yoga can evoke a lot of feelings of inadequacy,
Yes.
and in my 20s, I saw that as a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But my body was different in my early 20s, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I could push myself and not injure myself in the
Mm-hmm.
same way that I did when I was postpartum
Right.
and, you know, recovering from my body changing from having babies. Like, where I might have seen it as a challenge in my 20s, like, "Oh, that person can do a headstand. I'm gonna learn how to do a headstand," right?
Mm-hmm.
That was still triggering in a way, you know,
Yeah.
that like perfectionistic way of being. Those of us who like love to be the straight A student, it's like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And when you like, that's no longer feeling like a challenge and it's starting to feel like a sense of inadequacy, that's even more upsetting, you know? And so
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes those group experiences can really evoke that in people and it turns people away from the practice. And so the beautiful benefits of it, we could still achieve in the way of listening to our bodies and moving intuitively without having that performative piece. So I just like, I think so many people can probably relate to what you said.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so tell us about your motherhood journey because I know that kind of lives in parallel with what you're doing now. So, can you talk us through? We know you wanted to be a mom and you are a
Mhm.
special soul that loved working with kids. Tell us that moment and that process. Was it something that you were planful about? Did it just happen upon you? How did you like dive into this first step of
Mhm.
motherhood? 8
Yeah,
years
I
ago,
think
which is a long time ago.
yes, I know, I know. It just feels like I blinked or, you know, like that's the experience of motherhood, I think.
Right.
Um, yeah, I think so I had really bad postpartum anxiety with my first. And I had always sort of like tended toward anxiety in my earlier years, which I think is what made me like love specializing in it because I learned so much about myself
Sure.
as I worked through all of this on my own. And as I was postpartum with my son and I really had to go inward to
Hmm.
figure out what is going on here. I think what I uncovered is I was like woefully underprepared for what motherhood actually is, right? Like I thought because I liked kids, it almost was a disservice to me how much I wanted to be a mom
Hmm.
because I really went in with very rose-colored glasses about
Mm-hmm.
what it actually meant
Mm-hmm.
to bring a life into this world that is your responsibility and your responsibility only, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it was just very eye-opening to me how much responsibility. And so I had my son at 26,
Mm-hmm.
and we were married for about a year, and we decided, like, let's just see. And we were one of the few lucky ones that a let's just see was like first month
The
pregnant.
time. Exactly.
And, and I was so excited, you know, like, I was so ready for that chapter. I felt like I did a lot of the things that I wanted to do before I got pregnant. You know, in college, I traveled, I went to
Mm-hmm.
Europe, I
Mm-hmm.
had all my fun years with my friends, and after we got married, I also got married young at 24. I was like, "Okay, I'm ready for this next chapter. I've always wanted to be a mom. I'm so excited for this." Like, so about a year in, around 25 is when we tried. I got pregnant. I had him at 26, and I was basically the first of my friends
Mm-hmm.
to have a baby.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them had really wanted to wait until they were, like, closer to 30, and so I didn't have anybody in my immediate circle or life that was a mom before me that I could have had some insight into the grind, you know, that it actually
Yeah.
is. And he came out and, like, immediately I just felt this oppressive responsibility.
Oh,
And it was, like, immediate of like, "Oh my gosh, this baby is mine."
yeah.
And every single thing for the rest of his life is my responsibility, and that thought, for some odd reason, had never crossed my mind before they placed him on my chest, and I was just completely terrified, and it was like an immediate, just deep, deep fear, and, and I repressed it because I didn't know what to do with that, right? And that just
Right.
kept bubbling and bubbling and bubbling, and within a couple of months, I was just anxious all the time about everything. And I feel like a lot of women of the generation before us, which was the only generation I could turn toward
Right.
for thoughts about motherhood, because nobody in my generation that I was friends with or knew of or
Oh
cousins or
man.
siblings or anything had babies yet.
Right.
So I could only look to the generation before me, and I feel like they must either had a different experience or rose-colored glasses go on
Mhm.
after a certain amount of years, and you
Right.
forget
Right.
actually is, you know, but when I would turn towards those people, they would be like, "Oh, but it's such a beautiful experience," and, "Oh," and, like, so I just felt so alone and isolated in how much I was struggling with it, and I was so disappointed in myself, and I felt so much
Oh,
guilt that I was struggling so much when I had
yep.
wanted this so badly, you know, and I thought this is exactly what I wanted, and then I'm sitting there and I'm like, on some level, like, "What did I do? Like, what did I sign up for here?"
Mhm.
And it's terrifying, and so, I think that was the biggest sort of wake-up call for me that really forced me to go inward and start to realize, like, I can't base my experience on what other people said or say their experience is. Like, I
Mhm.
have to be honest to myself and really be honest with what this experience has been like for me, so I can try to find a way to heal my way through this, and that's kinda what I did.
Wow. I mean, thank you for sharing. The way you articulated it was just like so spot on. So thank you. The word oppressive, I think, is so powerful because I think that is exactly what a lot of us feel when, and that's the purpose of why we're having this conversation literally right now. And why I started this is because there is this huge gap between what we're shown on TV, what we're told in casual conversation, what we're told from the generation above us of what this moment for your life is going to be like. And when you don't have that experience, that friction is so like hurtful and punishable, and like you're just living in this world of like, well, everyone told me it would be this way, I thought it was going to be this way, and then you're living this alternate universe. It is
Mhm.
terrifyingly lonely and very strange to work through.
Yeah.
So for you,
I mean, you have the words and education to identify what you were going through. Was it easy to come to? Was it hard to come to? And then how did you look to make steps to move through it?
Yeah, I think until that point, I had never tried therapy. And even though I had already had a master's in therapy at that point,
Yeah.
I had never gone to therapy myself, which I think was such a flaw of my graduate program and a lot of graduate programs
Oh,
is
sure.
like you need to be doing the work before you can do it for other people,
Yeah.
And I just never did. And I had this baby, and yoga had always been the thing that pulled me through
Mm-hmm.
anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
and it was enough. And then I had this baby, and yoga was not enough anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And just like moving my body was not enough anymore. And so I started to, I think somebody else who I worked with at the time had talked openly about having postpartum anxiety. And I feel like I remember, and I knew her so peripherally, like this is how sort of desperate I was for somebody to like talk to about this that could get it. And I only knew her like peripherally. And I just remember sending her a text message and just being like, how did you know you had postpartum anxiety?
Wow.
And like what did you feel and how did you get through it? And I remember her texting back and forth with me about it. And that was probably, I had my son in June. This was probably in like December or January
Oof.
that I was like finally coming to terms with like how
Mm-hmm.
anxious I had been because it had been stacking and like only getting progressively worse,
Yeah.
to the point where that around that time I started waking up in the middle of the night with like panic attacks.
Oh my
And
God.
it was a very somatic anxiety, like, it was very body-based, and my
Mm-hmm.
I did have some thought spirals with it too, but for me, it's when I get anxious, it's a very embodied experience. It's very heart racing, maybe panic attacks, it's very, like, muscle tension, like, it's a very somatic experience.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Which is scary too because then you're always in your head of, like, "Is this anxiety or am I dying?"
Totally,
And
yes. Because a panic attack feels like you're dying. You need to go to
literally
the ER. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Especially when you're woken up out of a dead sleep and you're just like hyperventilating.
Holy cow. Yeah.
And I would just tell myself, like, close your eyes, give yourself, set a timer, breathe for 3 minutes. And if your body doesn't calm down, then go to the hospital. If you can calm your body down, you know it's not a heart attack. And I would just do that. And finally, in like January, I started looking into therapists.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what was so heartbreaking for me actually is that the first like I only made it to the first session with like 5 therapists. And I think that that was actually a gift that other people don't have because I had trained in therapy. And so I knew like what it's supposed to be like.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I would sit down for that first session and these therapists were so wildly honestly like inappropriate and like unqualified, I
Yikes.
was just like, "I can't attend another session with you."
Oh my God.
And I remember when I was a therapist in the college setting, I would have students come in and work with me, and they would tell me these horror stories about therapists, and not that I didn't believe them, but I just, like, couldn't understand or relate or, like, have any clue of, like, how that plays out in real life.
Right.
And then I went to therapy, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is scary." And I'm, like, in this desperate need for somebody, and I'm sitting with these therapists who are doing all of the talking. They're, like, not holding I spent my first session, I was, like, cracked wide open, so ready to just spend the entire session bawling my eyes out, and I sit down. She talked the entire session. I barely got a word in
Mm,
edgewise. She talked about herself, she talked about her own child, she talked about her experience as a mom,
what?
and I was just like, is this real life? Like, is this
Yeah.
happening right now? Like
My
she was doing
God.
the intake with me, so she would ask me these like prescriptive questions and I would
Mm-hmm.
answer and then she'd go off on a tangent. And then she'd come to the next one and then she'd go off on a tangent. And I just left feeling so depleted
Wow.
and like, how is this real life? And it was a blessing and a curse because by the time I found a therapist that I actually liked, I had made the decision like, I'm opening up a private practice because if this
Wow.
is what's out there, like, we need to do better. Like, we, and
Wow. Yes.
And so that's what led to me opening up my private practice and specializing in anxiety and chronic stress related issues, because what was happening is I would come home from these sessions, and because I had training in therapy, and this is probably so weird, but I would come home and I would lay in bed at night and I would like re-go through the session in my mind, and I would be like, if a client said this to me, this is how I would respond.
Wow.
And then I almost like guided myself through a session by like redoing the entire conversation in my head. And like weirdly enough, I came to some really like profound epiphanies that way. And that's how I created this whole sort of like approach in my mind of how to really get to the root cause of what's causing the anxiety, you know?
Wow.
Because every therapist just wanted to stay at the surface of like, oh, you're feeling anxious? Have you tried journaling? Like they were just so prescriptive, like, oh, try this, try this, try this, try this. Have you done that? What about this? Read this book. And I was just like, this isn't therapy. Like I could
No.
get this by listening to a podcast or reading a self-help book. Like I need you to hold space for me so I can go inward and find the answers myself.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I only knew that because I had gotten a master's in counseling. So I think of all the people who go to therapy for the first time who don't have an awareness of what it's supposed to be, and sit down with a therapist and have those experiences, and then they just settle and they stay because they think that's what therapy is, or
Wow.
they give up because it was so not meeting their needs, and then they're scared to go back because they think
Right.
that's what therapy must be, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And because I was training, like I wasn't willing to settle. I just was on the hunt for the person that was going to do it the way I needed it to be done. And I just kept ditching people until I found that person. Um, but it was a really lonely, isolating experience to be in that state of need and reach out and feel so like unsupported.
I think too, when you are the first person in your friend group and family and all of that, there's such an unspoken like pressure that happens. And I don't know if it's internalized or even from the people around you are like kind of like reflecting it back to you. But I feel there is this either pressure to perform at some capacity in like a way. And I can only imagine that that would have been layered on all of the stuff that you're already feeling. That
Mhm.
is a lot. When you were in the awareness of what was happening for you, because I think too, although obviously I am not trained in any capacity, but I did have this feeling of like, this can't be quite right. Or for how long am I going to be feeling this type of way? Is there some red flags that you identified in yourself that maybe we could relate to as like, oh, if we are having some of these thoughts? I mean, I will tell you a red flag where you have to count for 3 minutes if you're having a panic attack in ER. I'm going to say right now that's probably a red flag.
I'm
Okay,
gonna go
good.
with yes.
There's one. Yeah.
I'm gonna go with yes. Yeah, I just felt completely out of control.
Yeah.
Like I didn't feel like myself, you know? And
Hmm.
I think to switch gears for a second and explain some of the science of this, if
Love it.
that's
Yes,
helpful.
please. Oh my God. Yes, please.
Because I think, again, what we begin to deem as flaws with ourselves, and we begin to shame and blame ourselves, or we begin to associate with a label that we think we can't ever get away from, like I have anxiety or I have depression and it will
Hmm.
just always be this way, right?
Hmm.
Um, in my working through this, the biggest thing I've learned is like the way that we speak to ourselves matters and the way that we view ourselves matters, right? And so when we can understand the science of what's going on, it's so much easier to be compassionate towards ourselves and to realize like there's a way out of this
Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with me and I'm not inherently flawed, you know?
Hmm.
And I think when I was going through this and my thoughts were like, oh my God, for the next at least 18 years, I have this child that I have to be responsible. Like, it felt so heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I couldn't make it through a day without feeling terrified of
Mm-hmm.
that level of responsibility.
Oof.
And what we know about the nervous system, right, is that, well, interestingly enough, after you have a baby, your sort of part of your brain that's responsible for activating that survival mode and, you know, being aware of threats and danger in your environment, it actually sort of shifts a little bit. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's more active
Right.
postpartum, which it needs to be, because that's why you can be sleeping next to your baby, or your baby could be in a different room and you can hear the most subtle sound and you'll wake up to it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yep.
the partner can be next to you and sleep right through it. Like, the way that the brain works shifts postpartum, which is a good thing. And also, it just creates more of an opportunity for things like postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression to take root, because now that fear center of the brain, the survival center, is already more active. It is like programmed to be more active postpartum. And so you layer on top of that any repressed or unresolved traumas or emotional experiences or whatever, and like, it's going to make that entire experience a lot more intense. And what we have learned is, if you think of something called the polyvagal ladder,
Mm-hmm.
and I always reverse it. If someone was to Google it, it would look different than the way I describe it, but intuitively it makes more sense the way I describe it. So if you think of this ladder, and at the base of the ladder, your feet are on the ground. And when your feet are on the ground, that's when you are the most regulated version of yourself. And we have all been there, like maybe momentarily. A lot of us haven't been there in a long time. But when we
But
are
it's all
this version,
okay. Yeah, exactly.
it's all okay. When we are this version of ourselves, like, we feel resourced, we
Mm.
feel capable,
Mm-hmm.
we feel compassionate, patient,
Mm-hmm.
we are calm and grounded, right? And we generally feel like we can kind of ride the ebb and the flow of our day without immediately going into like a spirally place, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's who we are when we're regulated, which is who we authentically are. But life gets stressful, and as it
Mm-hmm.
gets stressful, we start to move up the ladder. And these are the red flags, right? That you're moving up the ladder. Is first we go through that fight or flight space on the ladder. And that's when we start to feel the somatic sensations, maybe with like a racing heart or a fiery burning sensation in the chest, or a jittery feeling in the body, like we just can't turn off, like we're
Mm-hmm.
just on the wheel and we can't turn off. Our thoughts tend to be a little bit more like hypervigilant. They tend to be a little bit more worst case scenario thinking.
Mm-hmm.
We feel like we're not resourced, we're not
Mm-hmm.
capable, we can't do hard things,
Mm-hmm.
There's looming energy of something bad is about to happen, and you
Mm-hmm.
can't put your finger on it, but it's just kind of this presence, right? And a lot of us wind up getting stuck there. And that's what, in my experience, chronic anxiety is being stuck in that fight or flight place in the ladder. And so if those are any feelings that we're having, that's a red flag that we're kind of locked in that place.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, we can only stay there for so long before you kind of burn yourself out with all of that pent up energy in the body. So then we go higher up on the ladder into freeze.
Ooh,
And
yeah.
that's when we kind of collapse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we have that experience where now we have no energy. Everything feels heavy. We feel lethargic. We feel like we're just like going through like sludge. Like
Mm-hmm.
everything is like effort. And to everybody else, you might seem okay. You might still be doing the things that you're supposed to be doing, but internally you're like, ugh, I don't even want to get out of bed. Like, I don't have the energy for anything, or I'm just on autopilot and I'm just going through the motions and I don't really feel anything. I don't feel
Mm-hmm.
anything. I just numb and apathetic, right? And so those are all signs that we're kind of in that freeze state, which aligns with how one might feel when they're feeling depressed. Um, and so I think all of those are signs that, and I've experienced the range of that.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to learn like when your body is getting into those places to realize I'm very dysregulated and I need to find a way to come back down the ladder.
Wow. Okay. I love that. And those are really good tips. And I think you explained it so clearly, because you're right. It's like you start to normalize a level that you're at in the ladder, and you're like, oh, it's normal for me to feel jittery when like baby starts to cry, or it's normal for me to, I don't know, get anxious being alone with the baby for so long, like all of those things. So thank you. That was very good, and very thoughtful. So in that postpartum anxiety, and you found the therapist to work with you, hold space with you, what was that like? Were you cured? Did you stop? Was it like, oh, after a few sessions, you're like, oh, I'm really having this breakthrough? Did you revert back? Like, what was that kind of like, I guess, healing journey through?
Yeah, yeah. That's a great question. I remember I sat down, and this was a male therapist. It was the first male I had tried, and I really went in with very low expectations because of that. It's like, how is he going to understand my
Yeah.
experience with a mom? And, but I was so desperate, and he came recommended. So I remember I sat down for the first session, and I kid you not, he was the first person. He looked at me and he was like, tell me about the day you gave birth.
Wow.
It was like the first, after 5 people, he was the first person that asked me an open-ended question. That's what that's called, an open-ended question.
My God.
Just like, here's like what you're doing right now, open-ended questions. Tell me about blank, and letting the person just process it out loud, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, First person that did that. And I just started crying because the day that I gave birth was really emotional. And I was just really honest of like, I did not feel the immediate love that everybody talks about. And I was just holding, for that point, like 9 or 10 months of guilt about that moment that he came out and they put him on my chest. And the first thing I thought was, oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
what did I do?
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first thought, because it was just this
Yeah.
overwhelming, massive responsibility. And nobody had talked about how that was like a normal feeling. Everyone only
Right.
talks about put the baby on your chest and you're immediately flooded with this insane amount of love. And interestingly enough, I did have that experience with my daughter, but it's because I wasn't experiencing the whiplash of going from not being a mom to being a mom. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, and so he asked me that question. I immediately started crying. And he just continued to ask me open-ended questions the whole session. And in my answers, he started to pull out themes that he was noticing. And this is what therapy should be.
Right.
And he started to be like, I'm noticing that a similarity between what you experienced postpartum and what you experienced at this other time in your life when you were very anxious, which was when I was working at a college and I was the college therapist. And I had all this responsibility around deciding whether or not students needed to be hospitalized or they
Oh
needed
man.
to
Right.
their in their spaces and work through it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very unhealthy work environment where I didn't have as much mentorship as I should have had at that age.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was overwhelmed with anxiety at that point in my life too. And so by like pulling these things apart, he was like, it feels like when you feel a sense of oppressive responsibility, your body responds to that. And that was the first time that
Wow.
somebody had even pointed out a pattern in me,
Right.
you know?
Right. Right.
And I was just like, I felt so seen and so validated. And like, that was such a small thing in the big puzzle of all the things that I would eventually learn about myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I just felt so like, oh my gosh, somebody's helping me figure this out for once.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself was healing. And that's what they say about therapy is like, it's not so much any technique or anything, it's the relationship. The
Mm-hmm.
relationship is the healing part of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the first person that made me feel safe in a relationship
Mm-hmm.
with a therapist. And so we did a lot of really great work together. And I think what I learned, to answer your question of like, was I cured and healed
Yeah.
and like what did like after that, you
Right.
know? I think what I learned is, and there's this other quote that I love that again, I'm forgetting where it comes from, but like it's not about stopping the waves from coming.
Mm-hmm.
It's about learning how to surf. And
Oh.
that's what I learned. Is like I don't have to hold myself to the standard that I always need to be regular.
Mm-hmm.
That's not realistic.
Right.
But when I start to feel anxious, instead of looking at it like this ominous threat
Mm-hmm.
that sucks back into the spiral of anxiety and all my progress is out the window and all this stuff, right? I started to look at it like, okay, what is my body trying to tell me? Or I'm getting really irritable and I'm
Mm-hmm.
losing my patience more often. I'm snapping at my kids or my husband. What is this trying to tell me? And
Mm-hmm.
instead of immediately looking at these things like flaws or ways that I'm failing in some way, it was just like, okay, this is just my body's alert system letting me know I have moved up the ladder. And I stopped viewing everything in this like black and white, I'm well or I'm unwell, or I'm healed or I'm unhealed way,
Right.
that kind of conditioned to think like, oh, once you get better, you should always be better.
Right.
And I started to look at it like just movement on a ladder. And that was before I had the awareness of the nervous system and like the ladder, but to give that language to other people now. At the time, I think I just looked at it like it's just fluid. It's
Mm-hmm.
fluid. It's not a big deal. Like if I have
Mm-hmm.
a day where I'm anxious, it's just my body trying to tell me I'm maxed out.
Mm-hmm.
So what have the last few weeks looked like?
Mm-hmm.
Have I been taking care of myself? Have I been aware of my triggers? Have I been supporting my energy when something triggers me? Have I had enough quiet moments to just down regulate?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where the freedom came and continues to come is that like I still get anxious sometimes. I still need to use techniques to ward off a panic attack. It just happened in around Christmas time this year. I was at TC and the lights were going all over. It was raining. I was driving. They were like reflecting off of the raindrops. I hadn't eaten in like 7 hours because I had my massive to-do list of all the Christmas things I needed to get
Right.
done. And I was sitting there at a stoplight and I felt my whole body like on the precipice of a panic attack.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of freaking out or getting angry at myself, I was just like, okay, I'm really overstimulated and my blood sugar is probably not great right now.
Yeah.
And I pushed myself to the brink with my mental load the last
Mm-hmm.
couple weeks. And so I knew somatic practices. I was sitting there and I did my somatic practices and I didn't freak myself out that like it was the end of the world and I'm failing because I should have already hacked this by now. And like it was just very like matter of fact, like these are the reasons why this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I can do to help myself. And I did it. And within a couple of minutes I was okay. I went and I got myself some food and I was able to move on from it. And so I think that's the biggest takeaway I want people to have is like we're not aiming to get rid of these things forever. We just want to feel more resourced in how we move through them.
I love that. Thank you for sharing and breaking that apart because I do think that's important. I mean, even when I asked the question, I was like, how do I say that? Because you're
Yeah.
right. It is kind of this like movement. And I think the thing that you're saying, and you said it in the beginning, is we don't know what to do with big feelings or feelings in general, any type of feeling. So I thank you for sharing.
I think the biggest thing that comes up for me is just like find your safe space. Maybe it's a therapist, maybe you have to go through 10 therapists. Maybe it's your partner, maybe it's a friend, but like don't try to force a safe space. If somebody doesn't feel like a safe space, trust that. They could be the most well-intentioned person, but if they don't know how to hold space for you and you don't feel like your whole body takes an exhale when you're talking to them, then they are not your safe space. And that's the biggest thing that I think people don't realize is like, well, they should be. They're my partner, they're my parent, they're my sibling, right?
Right.
It's like if your body doesn't take a full exhale when you are talking to them, in this particular case, they are not your emotional safe space. And we need to find at least one place where that can feel true for us so we don't feel so alone in what is an incredibly scary experience because we're not supposed to do it alone. And so I think that's just the biggest thing I want people to know if they're really genuinely struggling right now in those ways.
And such a good reminder because I think when you are vulnerable and you're looking for the outlet or a familiar face or like a comforting hug or someone to say you're just fine, you do turn to potentially people around you that you would assume would be a safe space. And if that doesn't happen, I would imagine sometimes that can be even more damaging.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people can be well-intentioned and not meaning to hurt you,
Of
but none of us
course.
are trained on how to hold space for others. Like, you're doing a very good job of that right now, and I could tell it's like innately in you,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not for a lot of people. And so when
Mm-hmm.
people start to get emotional around people who are nervous about emotions, then they do the thing where they just want to rush it along. And so that's the biggest thing. It could be so well-intentioned, and also they could not be your safe space.
Ugh. Love that. I am replaying all of these really small moments, Alyssa, as you're talking, and I am like, oh my God. So many breakthroughs. Um, so many. Okay. So
Yeah.
my next question is because I'm so curious. You go through this experience with the first one, and then you now have a second baby. Tell me, what did you prep? Well, one, was the experience different? And two, what were some of the prepping things that you did
Mm.
to understand that that could be a possibility for you with your second baby?
Yeah. I think I had just developed a really different. So I waited until my son was almost 2 before I had my daughter. And I say that not because that's significant, really, but it was significant to me because I had planned in my head that I would get pregnant again when he was like a year old,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted them really close in age.
Mm-hmm.
And had I not done the work that I had done, I would have gotten pregnant again at a year old
Mm-hmm.
because I would have had very little awareness of my body telling me I wasn't ready yet.
Wow.
And because of the work that I had done, I knew when I got to that 1 year mark, I am not ready yet. Like, emotionally, physically, I still have more work to do. I'm not in a place where I feel stable and grounded enough to have another baby.
Wow.
And so I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of took it month by month. And I was just like, I would see a friend get pregnant. And if I didn't feel a stirring in my body of like, oh, I'm ready, I want that too, I was like, I'm still not ready. And I
Mm-hmm.
just like, it was so empowering to listen to myself in that way of like, I'm not ready, I'm not ready, I'm not ready. And then all of a sudden, close to the 2 year mark, I started to feel those stirrings of like, oh, okay. When I think about childbirth, I don't immediately feel like my body is going to fail me and like it doesn't feel like this scary thing. Or when I think about, and my childbirth with my son wasn't particularly bad, but he was 10 days late and I was induced and it was 21 hours
Oh.
and it all wound up being okay, all things
Mm-hmm.
considered. Um, but a lot felt like it was not really in my control. And
Mm-hmm.
so the thought of going through that again felt scary for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And once that started to change, I started to feel like, okay, I can do this. Like my body can handle carrying another baby. I can birth another baby in a beautiful way. Like once that like language inside of me started to change and my perspective started to change, then I was like, okay, I'm ready for another baby. And I'm just like so incredibly grateful for the work I did on myself in the time between the two, because I felt like even though I don't think there's any like end healing
Mm-hmm.
journey, like I just knew myself and loved myself and trusted myself so much more the second time around than I did the first time around. And that made all the difference. And so by the time she came, I had like just so much more trust in myself and my voice, and my birth experience was like perfect and beautiful to me, like to
Yeah.
somebody else that would have been. But like for me and like what I wanted, it was so empowering and so beautiful. And she came out and they put her on me, and I had that feeling of like, ah, I'm so
Mm-hmm.
happy. Oh, she's mine, and like all of these things. And I just feel like I just knew myself so much more. And interestingly enough, and this, I only share this little bit because it was such a moment of pause for me of what would have given me an extreme anxiety a couple of years prior. But I'm in the hospital with her and I'm like holding her, and I text a friend and I tell that friend like she's here, and I send her a picture, and that friend was also pregnant, like 18, 19 weeks pregnant. And I texted her and she's like, congratulations. And then she's like, I didn't want to tell you this before you went into labor because I know that it would have been heavy on you.
Mm-hmm.
She knows. She was like, but I lost the baby. And my whole body, and I could feel, because my system is so primed to view deep emotions like grief as a threat. And I would have immediately gotten anxious, immediately, right? And I could feel the stirring starting to come up, and I knew that it was going to like shift this experience because things impact me very deeply. And I had this moment and I felt the anxiety coming up and I just stopped and I was like, just let it be sad. Like, just let it be sad. And I just like cried for her, for like a few minutes, just like had so much grief for her and for losing the baby. And like, and it just moved through me.
Mm-hmm.
And like, after a few minutes, I was like, okay, I can move on from this. You know what I mean? Like, not in a way of like, forget that this happened, but like, I feel resourced again to
Right.
continue to hold space for her and for me and for my postpartum experience of just like, my baby's here, yours isn't. It was just a very conflicting juxtaposition in that moment.
Of course.
And, and that's what was different. And I felt like for every step of the way when something would happen, I would come back to like, just be with your feelings, just be with your feelings, just be with your feelings. And it made it easier. Now, fast forward 6 weeks and the world shut down.
Oh my gosh, you were one of those.
The pandemic started. And a lot of those coping skills went out the window, if I'm being honest. So the first 6 weeks were beautiful. The first 9 weeks probably were beautiful. And then things changed, which I'm happy to talk about too. But yeah, those were the biggest shifts I noticed in myself.
Ah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that moment of like holding space for somebody else. I think, too, this is a little off topic, but I feel important to say there is such an interesting story around feeling so thankful and happy, whether you get pregnant right away or breastfeeding is easy, like all of these kind of like little details that happen in that motherhood journey. And then equally and in parallel, you're like talking to people, interacting with people, potentially they are, walking that kind of path with you that have a different experience. And sometimes that can be so negative when you're, thriving on the other side, or vice versa. You're experiencing the, not so great feelings, and then that person next to you is thriving. I think that happens so often in motherhood.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Because how you explained how you moved through that, I think hits at a point that I think so often it's very similar in so many motherhood stories where we use language around, well, my birth wasn't traumatic, but it hit me this way. Or, I did get to breastfeed. I'm so happy, but it's okay if you don't. Like, that's fine too. Like, there's a lot of that language. Mm-hmm. I'd love your just quick thoughts on those things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the most freeing things I have learned myself that I take into my private practice with my clients, and now I take it everywhere, is like duality, right? And we can hold more than one emotion at the same time. And I never knew that. Like, I never knew that. And what I mean when I say that is like, for example, we moved to Florida, right? We left Pennsylvania. We're 1,000 miles away from everyone that we know, love, and care about for the most part. Upon moving here, we've created people we know, love, and care about here. But upon moving here, we had no one and we left everyone, right? Mm-hmm. And duality was huge for that because it was like, can I deeply miss everybody that we left and hold space for that while also feeling excited, just as excited and aligned, knowing that this is the right choice for us here. Mm-hmm. And I say it to my kids when I'm dropping them off or something, right? It's like, you can miss mommy and have fun at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think we realize that we can hold space for two things at once. Like, I can be grieving for you and feeling gratitude for my baby that's here right now at the same time. It's like one doesn't have to always dilute or um, make the other one bad, you know? Like, well, if you miss mommy, that means that you're going to have a miserable time.
Mm.
Or if you're happy that you're here, it means that you don't miss me and you should feel guilty about that, you
Mm.
know? Or if I'm grateful for my baby, then that means I don't care about what you went through. Or if I'm only grieving your baby, that means that I have no space to be so happy for my own. And that duality, that literally wasn't something that was in my awareness until I was like in my late 20s, like my whole life, just like living, thinking that one feeling needed to dominate the other. And I think I had so much guilt, so
Mm.
much unnecessary guilt. Like
Yes.
when I was happy about something, but I knew somebody else was struggling, or I was like moving would have been an incredibly guilt inducing experience of like, I shouldn't be happy when I miss all these people and they all miss me. Like, or I don't deserve to feel happy if X, Y, and Z is also present. And that duality of just like, can you hold space for both without one overshadowing completely the other is huge. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just been really big for me in my work with myself and other people.
I love it. That's like literally exactly and so eloquently put. I think to tell you, I think that's been my biggest lesson in motherhood. Is like I didn't know that I
Hmm.
could be very frustrated but so happy all at the same time. Or think you're the
Hmm.
cutest little thing that's ever existed on the face of the planet. No one can tell me otherwise. But
Yeah.
also, I'm very, 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 very annoyed by you and I need some time by myself.
Yes. And one doesn't make the other wrong,
Okay.
Like,
Yes.
and that's the beauty. It's like I can be so annoyed with you right now, and I don't need to feel guilty about that because I know that simultaneously I also love you so much my heart could explode. So like it's so freeing. It's like so freeing, I think.
It's so freeing. And I think it's so triggering to speak on duality because I think when we look at, and I'm so sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but I really
No,
want you
just
to come
rolling.
with me, is when people talk about motherhood in general, I think it like triggers people in such a crazy way. Did you
Mhm.
see the clip of it's some like new music star and she literally says, "Don't have kids because all of the parents I know are so upset." And then you have all of these people or like they hate their lives or something. You have all of these people that are then commenting on it. And in my mind, and what I'm thinking, and literally what we're saying right now, is wow, what a friend to hold space for people to complain to her. How unfiltered and normal it is for her to say, hey, this has been my experience with my friends that have kiddos. And then, two, why is everyone freaking out? We all have felt that.
Right.
And we have this equal other feeling that we can say in addition or whatever without making her feel bad for sharing that. Did you see that go
Mhm.
around?
I didn't. I saw something similar that you're making me think of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Not that specific video, but I know the experience you're talking about
Yeah,
for
it's
sure.
so interesting.
Mhm.
And I think, again, I think it's just that's the perfect example for
Yeah.
what I think we're talking about, that beautiful example that you shared, and honestly, kind of this motherhood path that we go on.
Mhm.
It is okay to have those conflicting feelings.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a woman not too long ago, and she was like, I feel like this whole conversation is doom and gloom. And I was like, is it? I don't think it is at all. I think you're speaking a truth that is part of it in addition to
Mhm.
everything else that you feel on
Yeah.
on your journey. And I
Well,
I
and I think go ahead.
no, I'm just going to say I think that's okay. It's okay to share that.
Mhm. Yeah. 100%. And I think to your point, to me, what that feels like is people who haven't learned how to make space for the icky emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us, again, are conditioned
Mm-hmm.
to be that way. It's like, I can only view the positive, or I'm a bad mom.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not grateful and I'm not enjoying every second of this, I'm a bad mom. And to have somebody point out that that's not probably your authentic truth because other people don't feel that way is so deeply triggering because like it's confronting. Like I'm not willing to look in the mirror and admit that not every moment of this is beautiful. And if I did, that would mean that I think horrible things about myself. And that's why I had such bad postpartum anxiety because I was
100%.
trying to look in the mirror and realize and be honest with myself that I don't love every part of this. And when those thoughts did arise, I berated myself for being an ungrateful, horrible person, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And when you can step back and just make space for those feelings and not judge them and just experience that duality, then it becomes less triggering to hear other people talk about their mixed emotions because you might see yourself in some of those emotions. And instead of having that be confronting and triggering, you can be like, yeah, that's just true. That's part of it. That is
One
valid.
million trillion percent. Ah, I love it. Okay, so talk to me about COVID coming up and coming down here and coming into what you're doing now.
Yeah, so COVID was really challenging. I'm an
Yeah.
extrovert. Um, and I feel like one day, and my postpartum experience with my son was so interesting because I hated being home. Like I hated. And so if the pandemic happened with my son, I always joke like I would have been institutionalized. Like there is no way, like thank God I was only tested to the amount that I was tested with him. So I had the
Mm-hmm.
resources. So when I was tested extra with her, like my capacity and my window of tolerance, which is what that's called, was like larger.
Yeah.
Because as an extrovert, it was very hard to be home with two kids all day and not have anywhere to go, anything to do. Um, and then winter came, and now
Oh.
I can't even get outside and play with them. Now I'm just trapped in the house with these kids. And so I did okay for a while. And then all of a sudden, around when she was probably around 3 months old, my son turned 3 and he stopped napping. My husband went back to And I'm just home all day with a kid who's 3 years old, and we all know how 3-year-olds are, who had just stopped napping. So I'm not getting that break in the day anymore to
Right.
just
Yep. Yep.
my husband's gone all day, and I'm responsible for entertaining these kids from sunup to basically sundown by myself with no other adult interaction. And so many of us, I'm sure, can relate to like what that was like during the pandemic. And on top of that, I have my private practice.
Mm-hmm.
So my husband would get home and I'd be like with the kids all day. He'd get home and then I'd be like, okay, got to go hold space for clients now
Oh
in
man.
their emotions and their whatever. And I'm like barely holding it together myself.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I knew and I had the vocabulary to be like, my nervous system is maxing out,
Mm-hmm.
I can't do this, I had nowhere to turn. Like, I had nothing to do to relieve myself because I felt like none of my circumstances had any ability to change at that time. And I probably was the worst mentally that I think I've ever been for a period of time, probably like a year. Um, and I wouldn't say it was so much anxiety, but I like started to have a lot of like physical symptoms. So then I started freaking out about my health. And I think a lot of it, I went and got hormone testing done, and my like cortisol levels were just like a complete flat line, which basically means you've like depleted your nervous system, basically, right?
Oh my God.
And I was just on all the time, like energetically and emotionally holding space for other people, aka my kids and my clients, and never doing the things that would fill my cup up because they were all closed
Right.
and like nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Um, And so fast forward, my parents have a little house in Florida on the other coast. We would go start going down in January and stay for a couple of weeks. And I was just like, this is so life-giving
Yeah.
to be outside in January rather
Mm-hmm.
than seated and trapped inside of these four walls. And so like year one, we did that. Year two, we did that. And year two, we were sitting at a cafe and my husband's like, what if we just don't go home? And I was like, you cannot tempt me with that because I
Right.
had been
Like,
wanting.
how serious are you? Because I'm going to say
Right.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, like, you know I've been wanting to move south since before we met. Like, I can't do winters. I hate the cold. Um, and so then we started really seriously looking. And a year later, we found Sarasota and we found it. And like literally a few days later, we found a house and it was
Stop.
like bing, bang, boom,
We're here now.
really fast. And 6 months later, we were here. Um, And when it's funny because when we moved here, I had to take a break from seeing clients for about like 5 weeks because we moved in July. School wasn't starting, preschool, regular school, so we had no childcare. And I had to, my husband was starting a new job, and like I was like, I can't work. Like we have nobody, literally nobody to watch our kids here. And so I took
Right.
a break from working. Then they started school, and I just like couldn't muster up the energy to get back into client work. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
so much more burnt out than I even realized. And I would just go and I would just sit on the beach for like, I would drop them off at school and I would just sit on the beach for like an hour, like multiple times a week. And I would just stare at the water. And like, I felt like I slowly started coming back to life, but I didn't even realize like how much had been stripped away from me energetically by just being in that place for so long of just giving, 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 giving. And, that was the moment where I was like, I don't think I can go back to one-on-one work in the way that I was before. Like I think I need something different now. And that's what really led to me getting the additional training and bridging those worlds because I'd always had this inkling that I wanted to do that, but I kind of was like putting it on the back burner because one-on-one was my business. That was my how I got my income.
Right.
And doing anything different felt really scary. And I got to a point where I was like, I don't care if it's scary. Like, I just can't keep doing this anymore. I have to figure out something else. And that's where we are now.
Oh my gosh, incredible. I'm dying because one, it's just like such a full circle moment. Moving is a stress in and of itself. So when you guys moved and decided to move down here, which I think is just so cool, was it just like weather? Were you thinking that maybe there would be more opportunity career wise, or was there something else that got you down here?
Yeah, we mostly me did like so we decided in like January, like I think we're okay with moving. And for the next year, I really encouraged us and or went by myself to check out all of the places on the East Coast that I thought I could see myself living in that had always been on my radar. And so because and again, this was like the beautiful part of like knowing myself better is like I would go to a place and then I would just be like, how do I feel here? And for so many places, it would be like, no, this doesn't feel like home. This doesn't feel like me. This doesn't feel like where I can see us. And so I was starting to get really discouraged because I was like, maybe the grass isn't greener. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's a me thing. Maybe I just need to get better at handling winter, because every place I went, I was just like, this one isn't it. This one
Yeah.
isn't it.
Mm-hmm.
The closest that we came was Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And I was like, I could see us here. Like that was the first place where I was like, when something feels right, you could just like almost like see your life unfolding
Mm-hmm.
there. When it doesn't feel right, your whole body has this reaction of like, what would it even be like to have my kids go to school here? Where would I
Mm-hmm.
even go get coffee? You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm. Yep.
it's just very interesting when you put yourself in that position of like, can I see my life here? And in Raleigh, we could, but and we had like taken pictures of our house to sell it. Like we thought we were going to Raleigh and we went like three different times. And the last time we went, it was Labor Day weekend, and I went with my husband, and we like went out to lunch, and we were like, I don't know, I think it's too similar to Pennsylvania. Like, is it worth, like we're getting cold feet. Like, is it worth
Oh
leaving
my God.
everyone we know to go
Yeah.
somewhere that's kind of similar to Pennsylvania? And so we kind of were like, forget it, we're not going to move. So we went home that trip, we decided to finish our basement. And we were like, we're going to make the best of what we have and where we are. Like, grass isn't always greener. Just be grateful. And that was in like September. And then in January, we came down to Florida again to stay at my parents' house on the East Coast. And on the way home, I was like, we were driving. So I was like, let's just drive through Sarasota. It's the last place on our list. We haven't checked it out yet. Let's just see. And so we did a pit stop in Sarasota. I found a realtor on Instagram.
Love it.
And like the day before, he met us just to show us around. And we both were like, yeah, this is it. Within like 2 hours.
Okay. If you were to give yourself advice, pre-kiddos, pre, breaking through that wall, finding, this beautiful a new business that you have that really blends all of these things together, what kind of advice would you give her?
Mm. I think I would just say, like, you know yourself so much more than you realize you do. And like, it's going to be okay, Because at this point, I don't think I would change anything. Um, but I would have guided myself to trust myself more. I think I just grew up in an environment and in a house that was very like, I'm going to tell you how to think about this, and I'm going to tell you how to feel about this. And not intentionally, just because that's the way it was. And I think I've always had a really strong inner voice, but I ignored it a lot for that reason. In some cases. In other cases, it's always been loud, but in a lot of cases, I kind of ignored it. And I think I would have just told myself, like, you need to just become friends with yourself, and you need to learn how to trust your own wisdom and to make peace with sitting with yourself. Like, that was the biggest change that I made, is like my ability to sit with myself and not run from what I find when I sit, whether it be emotions or insights or memories or whatever. Like, learn to sit with the hard stuff and learn to trust and befriend yourself and your intuition, because every time I do that, I'm like amazed by what unlocks in my life, like every step of the way, when I come back to trusting that voice. And then, like you said, it's like, it's not just like rash decision making or impulsive decision making that's like, I'm just going to do this and that's it, here we go, right? It's like, by the time you make a decision, like, it feels so right that to somebody else it might seem impulsive, but for you, you're like, this is just, I just feel so guided by whatever's happening within, that like, I just know that this is the right step for me, whether it means that this is a forever step or like it's just the next step that needs to happen towards the next thing. I don't know, but I know it's the next step, and I just keep trying to honor and trust that every step along the way. But I definitely was not as trustworthy or anchored into that in my early 20s before I started this motherhood journey. And with mom stuff too, like coming back to that, it's like, so much in my early years, I like didn't trust my own wisdom around those things. And now I'm just like, no, this is what feels right to me, and what I want to teach my children, and what we believe, like, and how I want to teach them to find their own things to believe. It doesn't have to be what I believe, and sometimes that is different than other people. And I've just learned to kind of be okay with that.
So powerful, Alissa. I love it. Oh my gosh. I love asking those questions because honestly, I feel like you're telling me that.
Yeah.
So it's like hard not to take it personally. And you all should take it personally, I guess I should say. We do take it personally because those are such wise words and so powerful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to It's a Circus. If today's episode made you feel a little less alone, share it with a friend who might need it too. We are building something amazing at the Turner Brothers Circus, an entire space designed for parents to find connection, laughter, and support. I'd love for you to be a part of it. Remember, you're doing better than you think. Stay grounded, stay real, and embrace that beautiful mess. And as always, the show must go on. Until next time.